I'm Domingo, 56 years old, and a financial advisor who's built a quiet success despite being the forgotten son in my family. Every birthday throughout my life, I watched from the shadows as my younger brother received elaborate celebrations while mine passed unnoticed. Decades of this invisible pain taught me resilience, but this year everything changed because of an unexpected work bonus that finally allowed me to celebrate myself. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit subscribe and join me as I reveal what happened when I finally stopped waiting for recognition. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago shaped much of who I am today. My parents, Frank and Julia, had immigrated from Italy before I was born. They worked tirelessly to establish themselves in America, my father as a construction foreman and my mother as a seamstress. Our home was modest but comfortable, filled with the rich aromas of Italian cooking and the sound of my parents speaking their native language when they didn't want me to understand their conversations. Life changed dramatically when I was 8 years old. I still remember the day my parents sat me down and told me I would soon have a baby brother. Until then, I had been the focus of their attention, the embodiment of their American dream. I was excited about having a sibling, imagining all the things I could teach him and the games we would play together. Anthony arrived on a snowy February morning. From the moment my parents brought him home, I noticed a shift. While I had been a colicky baby who demanded constant attention according to family stories, Anthony was different. He had a charisma that drew people to him even as an infant. Relatives would coo over him, commenting on his bright eyes and infectious laugh. As we grew, our differences became more pronounced. I was the responsible, quiet child who excelled academically. My report cards were filled with A's, and teachers often commented on my maturity and focus. But these achievements rarely earned more than a passing good job from my parents, who were increasingly preoccupied with Anthony. My brother developed into a boisterous, athletic boy who struggled in school but excelled in social situations. Where I was reserved, he was outgoing. Where I was cautious, he was fearless. And where I faded into the background, Anthony commanded attention in every room. The first time I truly felt the sting of being overlooked was on my 10th birthday. For weeks I had been excited about the small celebration my parents had promised. Nothing extravagant, just a trip to the science museum followed by pizza with 2 friends from school. The day before my birthday, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. "Domingo, we need to talk about tomorrow," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Anthony has an important baseball tournament, and we all need to be there to support him." "But what about the museum?" I asked, my voice small. "We can go another time," my father interjected from across the room. "This tournament is a big deal for your brother. There will be scouts watching. You understand, right? You're the big brother." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. That night, I called my friends to cancel our plans, making up an excuse about being sick. The next day, I sat on hard bleachers for hours watching Anthony play while my birthday passed without acknowledgement. When we finally got home that evening, my mother remembered and hastily presented me with a store-bought cake and a wrapped present. The awkward singing of Happy Birthday felt like an afterthought. This became a pattern. When I turned 11, my birthday coincided with Anthony's school play, where he had a small but important role. My celebration was postponed and eventually forgotten. At 12, it was another sports event. By 13, I had stopped expecting anything at all. In contrast, Anthony's birthdays grew increasingly elaborate. For his 5th birthday, our parents rented a bounce house and invited his entire kindergarten class. At 8, they hired a magician and transformed our backyard into a carnival. By 10, they were hosting catered events with professionally designed themes. I found my refuge in books and studies. While Anthony practiced sports in the backyard with our father, I would sit at my desk solving math problems or reading historical novels. My teenage years became focused on building my future, knowing that academic success would be my ticket to independence. I mapped out my education path, researched scholarships, and set my sights on becoming financially secure. During these years, there was one person who noticed the imbalance: my grandmother Sophia, my mother's mother. On my 14th birthday, when everyone else was preoccupied with preparations for Anthony's upcoming basketball tournament, she slipped away from the family gathering and found me in my room. "Happy birthday, my Domingo," she said, sitting beside me on my bed. From her purse, she pulled out a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a vintage pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather. "He was a quiet man too," she told me, "but he saw everything and understood more than people gave him credit for. Just like you." That pocket watch became my most treasured possession. When grandmother Sophia passed away 2 years later, that watch served as a tangible reminder that someone had seen me, really seen me. The final birthday disappointment before I left for college was perhaps the most telling. My 18th birthday completely slipped my parents' minds as they threw themselves into planning Anthony's 10th birthday extravaganza. When I quietly mentioned over dinner that I had turned 18 that day, my mother gasped, "Oh, Domingo, I completely forgot. We've been so busy with the party planner for Anthony's big day next month." My father reached for his wallet and handed me a $50 bill. "Get yourself something nice, son." That night, I sat on my bed holding my grandmother's pocket watch and made a promise to myself that I would build a life where I was valued for who I was. College couldn't come soon enough. College represented more than academic advancement for me. It was my escape, my chance to redefine myself outside my family's shadow. I attended Northwestern University on a partial scholarship supplemented by student loans and a part-time job at the university library. For the first time, I existed in a world where people knew me without knowing Anthony. The library job suited my temperament perfectly. Among the towering shelves of books, I found peace in organizing knowledge and helping fellow students locate resources. It was there during my sophomore year that I met Eleanor. She was researching a paper on economic theory, and I helped her find some obscure journals. What began as academic assistance evolved into coffee discussions about economics, then dinners, where we talked about everything from politics to our favorite novels. Eleanor was studying finance, with plans to enter the investment banking world. She had a brilliant analytical mind coupled with a warmth that few got to see beneath her professional demeanor. What drew me to her was how attentively she listened. When I spoke, she focused entirely on my words, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. After several months of dating, I finally told Eleanor about my family dynamics. We were sitting in her small apartment off campus sharing a homemade pasta dinner. "They're not bad people," I explained, twirling spaghetti around my fork. "They just have a blind spot when it comes to me." Eleanor set down her glass of wine, her expression serious. "It's not about them being bad people, Domingo. It's about how they make you feel invisible. That's not okay no matter their intentions." Her validation of my experience was like rainfall after a drought. For years, I had rationalized my family's behavior, made excuses, blamed myself for not being more noticeable. Eleanor was the first person who simply acknowledged the unfairness without making me feel disloyal for noticing it. After graduation, I secured an entry-level position at a financial advising firm in Chicago. Eleanor took a job with a bank in the same city. We moved into a modest apartment together, beginning to build our life as a couple while advancing our careers. My approach to financial advising mirrored my personality. I wasn't flashy or aggressive in pursuing clients, but I was thorough, attentive, and genuinely invested in their financial well-being. Clients appreciated my methodical approach and clear explanations. Gradually, I built a solid reputation that resulted in steady promotions. Meanwhile, Anthony had opted not to attend college, instead pursuing what he called his entrepreneurial spirit. After high school, he launched a sports memorabilia business that initially showed promise, but collapsed after 18 months due to mismanagement. My parents dipped into their retirement savings to help cover his debts. This began another pattern that would continue for years. Anthony would conceive a new business idea, express boundless enthusiasm, secure family support and investment, then watch it falter due to lack of planning or consistent effort. After each failure, there would be a period of dejection before the cycle began again with a fresh idea and renewed optimism from our parents. While this played out, Eleanor and I were methodically building our financial foundation. By our late 20s, we had paid off our student loans and saved enough for a down payment on a small house in a promising neighborhood. When I was promoted to senior financial advisor at 32, we celebrated quietly with a nice dinner and updated our 5-year plan. The most significant moment of my adult life came with the birth of our daughter Lily. Holding her in the hospital, I made a silent vow that she would never question her worth or feel invisible. Eleanor and I created family traditions that celebrated each member equally. Birthdays were special days in our home, marked with thoughtful gifts and activities chosen specifically for the person being celebrated. Family gatherings with my parents and Anthony continued to follow the established pattern. At Thanksgiving dinner the year I made senior advisor, I mentioned my promotion briefly when my mother asked about work. "That's nice, dear," she said, passing the mashed potatoes before turning to Anthony. "How's the new business plan coming along?" My brother launched into an enthusiastic description of his latest venture, a food truck concept that would revolutionize street food. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking detailed questions and offering suggestions. We were thinking, my father said, we could help you with the initial investment. We've got some money set aside. I took a sip of water, avoiding Eleanor's gaze across the table. Just 3 months earlier, they had declined our invitation to Lily's dance recital because it was too far to drive on a weeknight. The drive would have been 20 minutes. After that Thanksgiving, Eleanor urged me to either confront my family about their behavior or distance myself for my own well-being. You don't deserve this, and it's not healthy to keep exposing yourself to it, she argued. I considered both options, but chose a middle path. I maintained polite limited contact while focusing my emotional energy on the family Eleanor and I were building. I recognized that my parents weren't likely to change fundamentally, and confrontation would only create greater tension without resolving the underlying issues. Instead, I found worth within myself rather than seeking it from family validation. My success at work, Eleanor's love, and Lily's adoration provided the recognition I had craved as a child. I built a life where I was valued even if that value wasn't acknowledged by the people who had raised me. As years passed, the disparity in how my family treated Anthony and me only intensified. My brother met and married Gabriella, a social media influencer with expensive tastes and ambitious social aspirations. She encouraged Anthony's tendency toward extravagance, viewing his periodic business ventures not as serious enterprises but as lifestyle accessories that could generate content for her growing platform. Last year marked perhaps the most extravagant celebration yet. Anthony turned 48 and simultaneously launched his newest business, a subscription box service for luxury pet accessories. My parents, now in their 70s, threw a combined birthday and business launch party that reportedly cost $50,000. The event was held at an upscale hotel ballroom featuring a live band, gourmet catering, and custom decorations that incorporated both birthday themes and branding for Anthony's new company. I learned about the event through social media posts, as I wasn't invited until 3 days before clearly an afterthought. Eleanor, Lily, and I attended briefly, making an appearance to maintain family peace. We watched as Anthony was presented with an enormous cake decorated with both birthday wishes and the logo of his new company. My parents gave speeches praising his creativity and entrepreneurial spirit, presenting him with a check that I later learned was for $20,000 as a business investment. This lavish celebration occurred exactly 1 week after my 55th birthday had passed, without acknowledgement from my family. Not a call, not a text, not even a belated card. Eleanor and Lily had made the day special with a homemade dinner of my favorite foods and thoughtfully chosen gifts. My colleagues had brought in a cake and signed a card. But from my parents and brother, there was nothing but silence. The contrast was particularly painful that year, perhaps because I was reaching an age that prompted reflection, or perhaps because the gap between treatment had grown so wide it was impossible to rationalize away. Whatever the reason, I found myself awake at night staring at the ceiling, processing a grief I had carried for decades but never fully acknowledged. Eleanor noticed my withdrawal. One evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, she took my hand. "They've shown you who they are for your entire life," she said gently. "At some point, you have to decide if you'll keep hoping for something different or accept the reality and protect your peace." Her words resonated with a truth I had been circling for years. The growing tension between Eleanor and my parents had become another source of stress. My wife had grown increasingly protective of me over the years, sometimes struggling to hide her frustration at family gatherings. More than once, I had to place a gentle hand on her arm during particularly blatant instances of favoritism, silently asking her to let it go. Lily, now 25 and working as a graphic designer, had also witnessed the family dynamics throughout her life. As she grew older, she became more openly defensive of me. "It's not right how they treat you, Dad," she told me after Anthony's party. "You've accomplished so much, and they act like it doesn't matter while Uncle Anthony keeps failing upward." At work, my career continued to flourish, despite my tendency to avoid drawing attention to my achievements. I had built a substantial client base of high net worth individuals who valued my conservative, thoughtful approach to financial management. Several had been with me for over 20 years, trusting me through market fluctuations and life transitions. What my family never knew or asked about was just how successful I had become in my field. While I lived comfortably, Eleanor and I had always been modest in our lifestyle choices, prioritizing savings and long-term security over flashy displays of wealth. We took quiet pride in paying for Lily's college education without her needing to take on student loans, and in building a retirement fund that would ensure our independence in our later years. The emotional toll of decades of being overlooked manifested in quiet ways. Sometimes alone in my car during my commute, a song or thought would trigger a wave of grief so intense I would need to pull over until it passed. I never shared these moments with Eleanor or Lily, not wanting to burden them with pain they couldn't alleviate. Over the years, I had developed my own ritual for my birthdays. Each year, I would buy myself one meaningful gift, something that represented an aspect of my identity or interests that had gone unrecognized by my family. Last year, it was a first edition copy of my favorite novel, a book I had mentioned loving to my parents multiple times over the years without them ever remembering. One particularly painful incident occurred about 3 years ago. My parents called asking for financial advice regarding their retirement accounts. I spent hours reviewing their portfolio, creating projections, and developing recommendations to ensure their long-term security. They listened attentively, thanked me for my expertise, and promised to implement my suggestions. 2 months later, I discovered they had withdrawn a significant sum from their restructured accounts to fund Anthony's newest venture, a specialty coffee shop that closed within a year. They had used my guidance not to secure their future, but to determine how much they could safely divert to my brother's latest scheme. The death of Eleanor's father last winter provided a stark contrast in family dynamics that gave me valuable perspective. Throughout his illness, we spent considerable time with her family. I observed how her mother and siblings supported each other through grief, how they acknowledged each person's feelings and contributions to the family. The experience illuminated what healthy family relationships could look like, making the deficiencies in my own family more apparent. As my 56th birthday approached, I found myself at a crossroads. For decades, I had allowed this pattern to continue by staying silent, by showing up at family gatherings where I was an afterthought, by accepting that this was simply how things were. But something was shifting inside me, a growing realization that my silence had become complicity in my own erasure. The catalyst for change came unexpectedly through my work, rather than a deliberate decision on my part. The financial firm where I had worked for over 30 years was having a record-breaking year. Market conditions had aligned perfectly with our investment strategies, resulting in exceptional returns for our clients and unprecedented profits for the company. During the quarterly all-hands meeting, the CEO announced substantial performance bonuses for senior advisors who had exceeded their targets. When my name was called and the amount displayed on the screen, I felt a momentary disbelief. $250,000, the largest bonus of my career by a significant margin. Colleagues patted my back and offered congratulations as I made my way back to my office after the meeting. I sat at my desk staring at the official letter detailing the bonus that would be deposited with my next paycheck. My first impulse was to call my parents to finally have something so substantial that they would have to acknowledge my success. I reached for my phone, then stopped remembering all the times I had shared smaller victories, only to have them minimized or forgotten. No, this moment was mine. This success was the result of decades of diligent work, careful relationship building, and financial acumen that had never been recognized by my family. Why share it now, only to have it overshadowed by whatever new venture Anthony was pursuing? That evening, I showed the letter to Eleanor. Her eyes widened as she read the figure. "Domingo, this is incredible. You've earned this." She hugged me tightly, then pulled back with a questioning look. "Have you told your parents?" I shook my head. "I was thinking about it, but I don't think I will. They've never been interested in my career before. Why start now?" Eleanor nodded understanding without needing further explanation. "So what do you want to do with it?" "Add it to our retirement fund." Before I could answer, Lily joined us in the kitchen, having just arrived for our weekly family dinner. When she heard about the bonus, she had a different suggestion. "Dad, you're always so practical with money," she said, reaching for plates to set the table. "Maybe this time you could use it for something that brings you joy. Something just for you after all these years of putting everyone else first." Her words struck a chord. Throughout my life, I had made responsible financial decisions. Save for retirement, save for Lily's education, save for emergencies. The few indulgences I allowed myself were small, reasonable. I had never made a major purchase simply because it would bring me happiness. Like what? I asked her, genuinely curious about what she thought might bring me joy. "Remember how you always talk about those summers you spent at your grandmother's friend's lake house, how peaceful it was, how you'd sit on the dock and read for hours?" Lily smiled. "You've mentioned wanting a place like that someday, but always as something for retirement, something for the future. Maybe the future is now." The idea took root immediately. Those summers at the lake were some of my happiest childhood memories. My grandmother would take me for 2 weeks each year, a respite from the household increasingly centered around Anthony. At her friend Martha's lake cottage, I had found tranquility and acceptance. The rhythmic lapping of water against the shore, the early morning mist rising from the lake's surface, the evenings spent playing cards or reading by lamplight. It had been a sanctuary. A lake house, I said slowly, the possibility unfurling in my mind. Somewhere quiet, not too far from the city. Eleanor squeezed my hand. I think it's a wonderful idea. We could spend weekends there, holidays. It could be our family place. Over the next month, I researched lake properties within a few hours' drive of Chicago. I worked with a realtor who specialized in vacation homes, being clear about my priorities, privacy, good water frontage, and a solid structure that wouldn't require extensive renovation. I didn't want something ostentatious or flashy, just a comfortable retreat where we could create new memories. The property we eventually found was on a smaller lake, about 2.5 hours from the city. The cottage had 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a large screen porch overlooking the water. The previous owners had maintained it meticulously, and the weathered wooden dock extending into the clear lake sealed the deal for me. I could already envision myself sitting there at sunrise with a cup of coffee, or in the evening watching the stars reflect on the water's surface. The timing worked out perfectly. We closed on the property just days before my 56th birthday, which fell on a Friday that year. As the date approached, I noticed an invitation appear in my email for Anthony's newest product launch party, scheduled for that same evening. The lack of acknowledgement that they had planned this event on my birthday was the final confirmation that my decision to keep the lake house purchase private had been the right one. I sent a brief, vague reply to my parents. Sorry, we have other plans that weekend. Hope the launch goes well. Their response was equally brief, with no mention or awareness of my birthday. The message simply read, Anthony will be disappointed you can't support him on his big day. For the first time in my life, I felt no guilt, no obligation to rearrange my plans to accommodate my family's oversight. Instead, I felt a sense of liberation as Eleanor, Lily, and I packed the car and drove to the lake house for my birthday weekend. The drive to the lake house that Friday afternoon felt symbolic, as if with each mile we were leaving behind decades of unmet expectations and invisible pain. Eleanor played our favorite jazz playlist, while Lily pointed out interesting sights along the way. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences, as we each anticipated the weekend ahead. When we finally turned onto the gravel driveway leading to our new vacation home, I felt a surge of emotion. This place was mine, purchased with the fruits of my labor, a tangible representation of a success no one could diminish or overlook. Welcome home, birthday boy, Eleanor said softly as I cut the engine. The cottage looked even better than it had during our previous visits. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the weathered cedar siding, and through the large windows I could see glimpses of the lake beyond. We carried our bags inside, and I took a moment to simply stand in the main room, absorbing the reality that this peaceful retreat now belonged to us. Lily disappeared upstairs with a mysterious bag she wouldn't let me see, while Eleanor began unpacking the groceries we had brought. I walked through the house, running my hands along the smooth wooden countertops, adjusting a chair, opening windows to let in the fresh lake air. Then I made my way down to the dock, where I stood watching small waves lap against the wooden pilings. In my pocket, I felt the familiar weight of my grandmother's watch. I took it out, opening the case to look at its face, thinking about how proud she would have been of this moment. She had seen me when no one else did, and in her memory, I was finally seeing myself clearly too. The birthday dinner Eleanor prepared was perfect grilled steaks, roasted potatoes with rosemary, and a bottle of excellent red wine we had been saving for a special occasion. We ate on the screened porch, listening to the evening sounds of the lake, talking about everything and nothing. After dinner, Lily disappeared again, returning with a cake adorned with candles and a wrapped gift. The cake wasn't elaborate, just a simple chocolate layer cake with vanilla frosting, but it had been made with love. As I blew out the candles, both Eleanor and Lily snapped photos. "Open your gift, Dad," Lily urged, pushing the package toward me. Inside was a handmade card featuring a beautiful illustration Lily had created of the lake house at sunset. Her artistic talent never ceased to amaze me. The message inside brought tears to my eyes. "To the father I hope to be, like someday patient, kind, and stronger than you know. Happy birthday, Dad. You deserve this moment and so much more." Beneath the card was a framed photograph I had never seen before. It showed the three of us from years ago during a day trip, we had taken to a different lake when Lily was about 10. We were sitting on a dock very similar to the one outside our new cottage, our feet dangling in the water, all of us laughing at something now forgotten. I found it in our old photo albums, Eleanor explained. I thought it belonged here in our new lake house, a memory that predicted the future. I hugged them both, overwhelmed by the love I felt in that moment. This was my family, the one I had built, where birthdays were remembered, accomplishments celebrated, and each person valued for exactly who they were. Later that evening, as we sat around the fire pit near the shore, Lily brought up an idea. Dad, I think you should let me post some photos of this weekend on social media. I raised an eyebrow. I was typically private, rarely posting anything about my personal life online. Why would you want to do that? Because you deserve to celebrate this, she said simply. You worked hard for this place and it's your birthday. Let's share a little of that joy. After some gentle persuasion from both Lily and Eleanor, I agreed. Lily took several photos, the three of us toasting on the dock, the sunset reflecting on the lake's surface, me standing proudly on the porch of our new cottage. She composed a thoughtful post with a caption that read, "Happy 56th birthday to the best dad in the world. Celebrating in your new lake house. You deserve this, and so much more." I didn't think much about the post after that. We spent the evening playing board games by the fireplace, then sat on the dock watching stars appear in the clear night sky. It was the most peaceful birthday I could remember, unmarred by disappointment or invisibility. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee, taking it out to the dock to watch the sunrise. The mist rising from the lake's surface created an ethereal landscape, and I sat breathing it in, feeling a contentment I had rarely experienced. When I returned to the cottage, I found Eleanor checking her phone with an odd expression. "What is it?" I asked. "Lily's post about your birthday in the lake house. It's getting a lot of attention." I picked up my own phone, which I had left on airplane mode since our arrival, and turned on the data. Immediately, notifications began flooding in. Colleagues and friends had left congratulatory comments, expressing both birthday wishes and admiration for the lake house. But interspersed among these positive messages were texts and calls from my family. The first was from Anthony. "Since when do you have a lake house? Thought you couldn't make my launch because you were busy with work." This was followed by messages from my mother. "Why didn't you tell us about buying property? Is this why you're missing Anthony's important event?" My father's message was more direct. "How can you afford a vacation home? You should have consulted with us before making such a purchase." The cascade continued with messages from extended family members, some expressing surprise, others veiled criticism about showing off or trying to one-up Anthony. As I scrolled through the messages, I felt a mixture of emotions. There was a certain vindication in seeing their reactions, a confirmation that they had indeed underestimated me all these years. But there was sadness too that their first response was not congratulations, but criticism and suspicion. "Are you okay?" Eleanor asked, watching my face. I set the phone down and looked out at the lake through the window. "Yes," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in a long time, I'm completely okay. We decided collectively to ignore the messages for the remainder of the weekend. This was my birthday celebration, and I wouldn't allow it to be tainted by family drama. Instead, we explored the lake in a small rowboat, hiked a nearby nature trail, and spent hours simply relaxing on the porch with books and conversation. Sunday afternoon came too quickly. As we packed up to return to the city, I took one last walk down to the dock, savouring the peace before facing whatever storm awaited us at home. The thought of confrontation was uncomfortable, but no longer frightening. I had created this sanctuary with my own success, and no one could take that away from me. We arrived home Sunday evening to find my parents' car parked in front of our house. Anthony's sleek sports car was behind it. Through the front window, I could see them sitting in our living room, clearly having been let in by our neighbour, who had a spare key for emergencies. "Ready for this?" Eleanor asked quietly as we pulled into the driveway. I took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Lily squeezed my shoulder from the back seat. "We're with you, Dad." The atmosphere in the living room was tense as we entered. My mother sat perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Anthony paced near the window, stopping when he saw us. "Well, if it isn't the secret property investor," he said, his tone attempting humour, but failing to mask the irritation beneath. "How was the launch party?" I asked calmly, setting my weekend bag down. "You would know if you had been there," my mother interjected. Anthony needed family support for his big night. I nodded slowly. And I needed family recognition for my birthday, which was on the same day. Funny how that works. A brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the room. It was clear from their expressions that this fact had completely escaped them again. "Your birthday," my father said flatly, more statement than question. "Yes, my 56th birthday. The same day as Anthony's product launch, which you scheduled without ever considering it might be an important date for someone else in the family." Anthony quickly moved to change the subject. "That's beside the point. What I want to know is how you managed to buy a lake house without telling any of us, and why you felt the need to splash it all over social media." Eleanor stepped forward. "It wasn't splashed all over social media. It was one post celebrating a significant milestone, and Domingo is under no obligation to report his financial decisions to anyone." My mother's expression tightened. "We're family. Families discuss major purchases, especially something as frivolous as a vacation home." Frivolous. I repeated the word, igniting something inside me. "Is that what you think, that after decades of careful financial planning and hard work, I haven't earned the right to enjoy the fruits of my labor?" "That's not what your mother meant," my father said quickly. "We're just surprised. You've always been so conservative with money. This seems out of character." "Out of character?" I echoed. "Or perhaps you just don't know my character as well as you think you do. Because if you did, you might have remembered my birthday at least once in the past decade." Anthony made a dismissive gesture. "Come on, Domingo. This isn't about a forgotten birthday. This is about you trying to show me up right when I'm launching my business." "Show you up?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Anthony, not everything is about you. This was about me finally doing something for myself after a lifetime of being overlooked." "Overlooked." My mother's voice rose slightly. "We've always been there for both our sons." The dam that had held back decades of hurt suddenly broke. Have you really let me remind you of a few things?" For the next several minutes, I spoke without interruption, laying out a detailed accounting of years of being forgotten, overlooked, and taken for granted. I spoke of childhood birthdays cancelled for Anthony's activities, of adult accomplishments dismissed or ignored, of the constant expectation that I would understand, accommodate, and step aside. For my entire life, I have watched you celebrate Anthony's every endeavor, successful or not. You've invested in his businesses, planned elaborate parties, and rearranged family events to suit his schedule. Meanwhile, I built a successful career, raised a daughter, maintained a strong marriage, all without recognition or interest from you. My parents sat in stunned silence. Anthony's face flushed with anger. "That's not fair," he finally sputtered. "You've always been the golden child with your perfect grades and responsible behavior. I had to work harder for attention." "Golden child?" I shook my head in disbelief. "Is that really how you see it, Anthony? When was the last time our parents attended any event that was important to me? When did they ever invest in my future, the way they've repeatedly invested in yours?" "It's different," my father argued. "You never needed our help. You were always so self-sufficient." "I was self-sufficient because I had to be," I replied. "But needing and wanting are different things. I may not have needed your financial support, but I wanted your recognition, your interest, your presence." I then revealed something I had never shared before: the extent of my financial success. For years, I've been building wealth through chaos, through careful investing and career advancement. The lake house was purchased with a portion of my annual bonus, a bonus larger than any amount you've ever invested in Anthony's ventures. But unlike the money you've poured into failed businesses, this investment will appreciate in value and create lasting memories for my family. My parents' expressions shifted from defensive to shocked as they processed this information. They had always assumed I was doing well enough, but not exceptionally, so based partly on my modest lifestyle choices and partly on their own lack of inquiry about my career. Anthony's anger intensified. "So this is about money, about proving you're more successful than me. Real nice, Domingo. Always have to be the responsible one, the successful one, making me look bad in comparison." "No, Anthony," I said firmly. "This isn't about you at all. That's the point you keep missing. This is about me finally celebrating myself after waiting a lifetime for my family to do it." The confrontation continued to escalate. My mother began crying, claiming I was being cruel by bringing up the past. My father defended their parenting, revealing that their overcompensation with Anthony stemmed from guilt about working so much during my early childhood. "We felt we had missed so much with you," he admitted. "We were establishing ourselves, working long hours. With Anthony, we had more time, more resources. We wanted to do better. So your solution was to ignore your firstborn entirely." Eleanor interjected, her patience clearly wearing thin. "We didn't ignore him," my mother protested weakly. You forgot his birthday 17 years in a row, Lily stated flatly. I've been counting since I was old enough to understand what was happening. The revelation of this precise tally silenced the room. 17 years. The number hung in the air, impossible to dismiss or explain away. Finally, I spoke again, my voice calm but firm. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations anymore. What's done is done. But going forward, things will be different. I won't continue to participate in a family dynamic where I'm an afterthought. I deserve better, and I've finally realized that if you won't give me the recognition I deserve, I'll give it to myself. With that, I stood and opened our front door, a clear indication that the conversation was over. Anthony, I wish you success with your new venture. I truly do. But I won't apologize for celebrating my birthday and my achievements in my own way. My family left in a storm of mixed emotions. My mother was tearful, my father subdued, and Anthony openly hostile. As they drove away, Eleanor placed her arm around my waist. I'm proud of you, she said simply. The weeks following the confrontation brought a painful silence from my family. No calls, no texts, not even the occasional family email that had previously kept us loosely connected. The absence wasn't entirely unexpected, but it stung nonetheless. I experienced a complex mixture of emotions during this time. There was vindication in finally speaking my truth after decades of silence. There was grief for the relationship I had always hoped might develop, but now seemed more unlikely than ever. There was anger that it had taken such a dramatic stand for my family to finally see me, even if what they saw made them uncomfortable. But most surprisingly, there was liberation. The weight of unmet expectations, of constantly hoping for recognition that never came, had been lifted. I no longer felt compelled to attend family gatherings, where I was peripheral to remember birthdays that would not be reciprocated, to invest emotional energy in relationships that consistently left me depleted. Eleanor and Lily provided unwavering support during this transition. We established a routine of spending every other weekend at the lake house, which quickly became our sanctuary. There was something healing about the rhythm of those weekends, the drive out on Friday evenings, the slow mornings with coffee on the dock, the afternoons of reading or hiking, and the evenings of conversation by the fire. I found myself sleeping better than I had in years. The constant background hum of family tension had been silenced, allowing space for genuine peace. I began pursuing interests I had long set aside: fly fishing, woodworking, and playing the guitar I had purchased years ago but rarely touched. At work, colleagues noticed a difference in my demeanor. "You seem lighter somehow," my assistant commented one morning as I arrived humming a tune. I replied, simply realizing the truth in her observation. 3 months after our confrontation, my phone rang one evening with my mother's number displayed on the screen. I stared at it for several rings, unsure whether to answer. Eleanor, seeing my hesitation, nodded encouragingly. "Hello, Mother," I answered, my voice neutral. "Domingo," she said, her voice sounding older, more fragile than I remembered. "How are you?" The conversation that followed was awkward but significant. She didn't immediately apologize or acknowledge the decades of oversight. Instead, she asked questions about my work, about the lake house, about aspects of my life she had never shown interest in before. I answered honestly but guardedly, unsure of her motives. Finally, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about being overlooked. I wanted to tell you that I see it now. I didn't before, or maybe I didn't want to, but I see it. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a beginning." We talked for nearly an hour, more openly than we had in my entire adult life. By the end of the call, we had agreed to meet for lunch the following week, just the two of us. That lunch was the first of many conversations that slowly began rebuilding something between us. It wasn't the relationship I had yearned for as a child, but it was more authentic than what we had before. My mother began making efforts to learn about my life, to remember important dates, to see me as an individual rather than simply as Anthony's brother. My father eventually joined in these reconciliation efforts, though more reluctantly. His pride made it difficult for him to acknowledge the favoritism that had defined our family dynamic for so long. But even he began making small gestures, calling occasionally to ask about the lake house, sending an article about financial advising he thought might interest me. Anthony proved the most resistant to change. His resentment lingered, fueled by what he perceived as my attempt to outshine him. Our interactions remained strained, limited to brief exchanges at the occasional family gathering I now attended on my own terms. But even he showed small signs of recognition, once acknowledging my expertise, when discussing a financial matter at a family dinner. Throughout this gradual healing process, I maintained firm boundaries. I declined invitations that conflicted with my priorities. I spoke up when old patterns emerged. I no longer accepted being an afterthought in family plans. The most profound realization during this year was that I no longer needed my family's validation. Their recognition, when it came, was welcome, but no longer essential to my sense of worth. I had built a life rich with meaning, love, and success on my own terms. For my 57th birthday, Eleanor, Lily, and I planned a weekend at the lake house. To my surprise, a small package arrived from my mother a few days before. Inside was a vintage book about the history of the lake, where our cottage was located, along with a card that simply read, "Happy birthday, Domingo. Love, Mum." It wasn't elaborate or effusive, but it was something that had never happened before. An acknowledgement of my birthday on time and thoughtfully chosen. The weekend celebration was small but meaningful. Eleanor prepared my favorite foods, Lily created a beautiful hand-drawn card, and we spent hours simply enjoying each other's company in the place that had become our sanctuary. On Sunday afternoon, as we prepared to return to the city, I walked down to the dock one last time. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the water, and a light breeze rippled the surface. I took out my grandmother's pocket watch, now worn smooth from decades of handling. "I wish you could see this," I said quietly to her memory. "I wish you could see that I finally found my place." The profound lesson I had learned through this journey was not about revenge or retaliation. It was about self-worth, about standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable, about creating your own joy rather than waiting for others to provide it. Sometimes being forgotten leads to remembering your own worth. Sometimes the absence of external validation forces you to find it within yourself. And sometimes the family you build becomes more significant than the family you were born into. As I drove back to the city that evening, Eleanor beside me and Lily following in her car, I felt a peace I had searched for my entire life. Not because my family had finally seen me, though some progress had been made there, but because I had finally truly seen myself. Have you ever had to create your own celebration when others forgot your special day? How did it make you feel to take back that power? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to celebrate themselves too. Thank you for joining me for this chapter of my life. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to be seen, even if you have to be the one doing the seeing.